Hey everyone, Warwick's here. We're back with another Season 1 dungeon guide. Today we're going to be doing Algethar Academy. So Algethar Academy is coming back from the Dragonflight expansion. So if you played in the Dragonflight expansion, you'll notice a lot of things about this dungeon haven't changed, but there are a couple of very important changes to note throughout this. Now, this dungeon was a fan favorite back in the time of Dragonflight. It was definitely one of my favorites. There's some really fun pulls that you can do in this dungeon. That'll be really nice big pull stuff. That's a good test of your team's abilities and coordinated groups. And it was known for having a couple of different pathways that you could take that were all considered viable and time-saving. Now, I've taken both paths on current beta testing, and this route that I've kind of developed here is going to be the one that I think, at least early on, will be best. And it's mainly because we want to avoid these arcane ravagers. They are terrible mobs. Now, we do end up fighting one, but I'd rather fight one rather than fight three throughout the dungeon. So it doesn't mean that you have to pull a little bit more later on in the dungeon, especially before the head teacher's enclave with these invokers. That can be some particularly nasty mobs and these Echo Knights, which have changed. But for the most part, I think this pathing is pretty good. And as you can see, it puts us 2 count over what you need overall. So personally, I really love this path. It feels really good to play. So this is going to be the suggested route. So obviously screenshot this. I'll see if I can put some export codes and stuff somewhere that are going to be easily accessible. But we're going to talk about the dungeon, and then I'll show footage of the boss fights themselves. So the first thing that I want to note here, obviously, is when you do the dungeon entrance, you're going to come across, and you can see here they have these different pledge pins. So each of these actually will give you different stats. So the black dragonflight gives you crit, bronze gives you haste, blue gives you mastery, green gives you a healing taken increase, and red gives you versatility. So you're going to pick basically whichever one is best for your spec. So for example, Vengeance Demon Hunter, I chose the haste one just because that gives hasted cooldowns on things like fracture, which means more damage because the season 1 tier set does give a giant damage boost to fracture in this case. So I chose haste, but I could have easily justified taking the crit buff from the black dragonflight or even the red dragonflight versatility buff, which is going to be like this, is always like the safest choice. Now, what you'll generally see most groups doing, and what I'm going to do, is you immediately head over here towards this area here, the Botanica, and I'd put all this in one giant pull, but you can break this down into 2 or 3 as you need to, but basically you're going to clear out this entire courtyard. And the reason for that is that you have to do that in order to activate the Overgrown Ancient boss, and go from there. Now, a couple of things to note is that these Vile Lashers are going to put green swirlies all over the ground. They spit out a bunch of them. So if you have 2 or 3 of these guys all in place at once, then you're going to be having to do a lot of movement. So if you're a caster and your tank is doing this, you're going to need to plan accordingly. The other thing is that these aggravated skitterflies do a darting sting, which will inflict nature damage onto this. Now, it used to be like a straight up poison, but they've kind of removed this. Now, this agitation is, I believe, it counts as an enrage effect. So if you have a soothe, you can use that to soothe the agitation of the skitterflies. But for the most part, this is going to be mostly about your tank positioning everything well, keeping everything in front of them so that they don't get back hit. And this is usually a good place where a lot of people will actually burn heroism and go from there. So that you can get the ball rolling and clear out this pack pretty efficiently and quickly. And it's obviously the first pack you pull so that you can get your hero back up for either Veximus or, if depending on the path you take, Croth. So let's go ahead and pull up the first boss, the Overgrown Ancient. This boss was notorious in early Dragonflight and then became one of the fan favorite bosses after they made some very targeted changes here. So as you can see right now, we're just about to pull this boss. And the recommended strat, now this group doesn't do it because it's a strat here, but you'll notice the strat for this boss feels very similar to the way that the third boss in Floodgate does, where the recommended strat is that you mark your tank and then everyone stands on your tank. Because what he's going to do is he's going to do this Germinate ability that's coming out right now that is going to, as you can see, put circles on the ground, and then everyone just moves left. And basically what that does is that really controls where these hungry lashers come out. Now, this first group of lashers do not actually spawn into mobs that attack, so they're basically there as damage pad fodder. But that ancient branch does come out, and that is an important mob to kill, because as you can see, you have a stacking debuff that is on you throughout the entire duration that these lashers are up, and that this ancient branch is up. So the ancient branch, I think, does have a kick that you want to make sure that you prioritize, but then he does this green circle around that everyone stands in, and it'll actually clear that debuff right as the next group starts. Now, as you can see with the second hungry lashers, these do spawn up and start attacking your mobs. So any misdirections and abilities for like hunters and rogues are going to be very important in order to make sure that your tank is getting good threat on that, and you want to make sure that you're saving any mass AoE snap threat for that. But you just kind of clean them out, go from there, and again, rinse and repeat. Now, these lashers are on a pattern where the first and third ones will always not germinate, and they'll just sit there. So again, they're there for pad purposes, and then that ancient branch is going to come out. The second and fourth ones are going to have activated lashers that you'll have to make sure that you're getting snap threat on. You can see it does do that healing touch that you make sure you have to kick, so always assign someone to make that kick. Usually the tank can take it on, but generally speaking, I remember as a DPS, I was always, as a Windwalker, I was always like, I'm sitting on this. Now, we had some unfortunate overlapping here with the branch going out and then also the swirlies going out. That's possibly just a situation where we need to fix the spell queuing, or we just didn't have enough funnel priority damage onto that ancient branch. It's quite possible. But that boss is like very, very simple. A lot of it's just like stack on your tank and then move on to moving with your tank. And most tanks will always move left. So that boss is, like I said, very simple, very straightforward. And if you paid attention to things like the boss in Floodgate, then you will notice that the strat is very, very similar to that. And if you have a spec or a class that does big AoE numbers, then you're going to be quite happy with how that fight plays out for you. So at this point, you actually, technically speaking, have two paths that you can take. Some people will double back and then go do Veximus first. I, generally speaking, will prefer to go up here and take out this Guardian Sentry. So you'll come to this platform that's right here, launch over in this Guardian Sentry. Now this Guardian Sentry has a couple of big things. So what I recommend if you're tanking is that you actually back him up against one of the four walls on this little platform that you're on and tank him against that wall, because these deadly winds will come out and basically they'll stun and do big nature damage. So you can kind of control the place that they're at, because they'll always kind of spawn either on the tank or on a DPS. So you can kind of control where these go and keep the rest of the platform open for you. The other big thing that he'll do is this expel intruders. Now this is a giant white circle that'll go out. Now some people will automatically assume, oh, you have to go all the way out of it, but the other truth is that you can actually line of sight it as well. So what'll happen is that when he casts it, a lot of melee and tanks will simply walk around the pillar that they're standing on, stand on the other side of it, so that they don't lose a ton of time when it comes to melee. Now certain immunities will work, so things like Death's Advance / the Rider Horsey for DK will avoid the knockback, but you'll still take the damage. Obviously immunities for bubbles will do that. My understanding, actually, because there's a lot of nature damage, Cloak of Shadows also works. And then you can shadow step back in if with any knockback that you get for rogue. So there are ways to cheese it if you choose to do so in order to get yourself just that little bit of extra DPS uptime. And generally speaking, tanks can take the damage, but you want to make sure that you kind of have your back to a wall so that you don't get knocked off, because this knockback is big enough to actually knock you off the platform and kill you. You'll then come over here and you'll do these three sets of eagles. So first off, you should start off with the basic eagles, and then this one pack with the alpha eagle comes down, and then two alpha eagles come down. And that brings us over to Croth. Now Croth has actually been changed quite a bit from what he was in Dragonflight. So let's take a look at this here. All right. So as you can see, Croth comes down. Now the strat in Dragonflight was that he would do this Screech ability that you would basically try to stack 3 or 4 times on before you would actually activate one of the side rings that are going to come out here shortly. Because you would just basically judge how your healer was going to handle it and then go from there. So here's that deafening screech. They added some new visuals to it to where it shows that if you overlap it, you go from there. Now, if you're the tank, obviously avoid the overpowering gust. It will knock you back. And then we're going to get this Savage Peck, which is the tank buster. So just have some mitigation up for it if you're a tank player. And then we're going to get our second Screech and our second Gust. And the Croth is a giant sack of hit points. There are a lot of routes that will actually prioritize doing hero here. Now, as you can see, we got this play ball. There's going to be 3 orbs that come out. And then you can see there's an orange orb and a white orb. Now, the strat in Dragonflight was that you would always go fire orb first. It would basically do what we're about to see here strat-wise with the with the fire orb. But this group decided to do Rushing Winds, the wind orb first. So with the wind orb, what it does is, as you can see, it does this big, huge gust. But you can see there's these orbs that will pop around. I'm going to go grab this one here in just a second. As you can see, boom, I grab it. And what that does is it actually stops you from getting pushed by the wind, and it gives you a little bit of a haste buff as well. So there's a benefit to everyone grabbing one of those. Now, this Gusting Wind goes on throughout the entire duration of the fight. Now, in Dragonflight, this was way more annoying than what it felt like here in Midnight. And so what we would always do is we would always take like 3 or 4 Screeches, and then we would drop the fire side first, which basically puts a bunch of firebomb stuff spinning onto the ground with some tornadoes that you have to avoid as well. As you can see here, we go from there. And so basically you would just ignore the wind side. Well, Blizzard changed the fight so that it made it so that you cannot do that anymore. You have to do both of them with the way this fight is set up. So you can see here, we activate the flame patch. Now the wind is still blowing around, and we're going to be getting these orange swirlies, there they are, on the ground here. And that's the rest of this fight. So this fight is definitely a damage race, a race against time. You're going to want to make sure that you are saving as many cooldowns as you can for this phase so that you can get there. And like I said, some people will actually fully design routes around making this a Bloodlust / hero boss, because he is such a huge sack of hit points. I almost died there. Wow, I forgot about that. Good cocoon. So that's Croth. I mean, he's really straightforward in terms of his mechanics. A lot of the bosses in this dungeon really are, but he is a huge sack of hit points, and with everything overlapping, things can get annoying. So you want to make sure that you are doing everything you can to kill him as fast as possible. This boss, more than any other, I think is the DPS race in this dungeon, because the longer you take on him, the more you just have to deal with the fact that you are losing control of your character by the winds pushing you around all the time. So yeah, that is Croth. And then again, at this point, you have 2 choices. You can either come back to this platform right here, and you'll get launched over here where you can face off on all these Ravengers and then grab these Mana Fiends and these Battle Axes. I'm actually going to choose to double back. We'll run back through the Botanica, and then we'll come grab these Mana Fiends, which are the main kicks here, and these Battle Axes, which are just very heavy melee. And then we pull this one Ravager. Now this Ravager, there's a couple of pieces of tech that still work on this. So right at the end of this bridge, there's giant pillars that are right at the corners of these bridge. One of the things that happens is all of your range should stand by this, and what can happen is that if he selects you for his charge, he does a little spellcast time on it. If you actually line of sight him, he will not move. Otherwise, he will jump to the person that he selected for the thing, and then he will turn around the opposite direction and do a big frontal conal breath that is annoying to deal with. So the goal with him is that you either stack up so that you don't really have a lot in the way of him leaping way out of like melee range, or you have one really durable melee, so something like a high mobility range, so like a Beastmaster Hunter, Devourer Demon Hunter, kind of stand out and be the ranged, and then when the charge happens, you either shift or you just move out of it so that you don't end up taking a lot of excessive damage, and then you just kind of play on the side of him the whole time. Now to spawn Veximus, the major mobs that you want to look out for are these Unruly Textbooks. They will do a cast called Monotonous Lecture, which will put someone to sleep. Now this can be dispelled, but mainly it's just the main kick. The Mana Fiends do have a couple of small casts with Surge and Mana Void, but like, you know, Surge you can kind of kick, you can kind of handle with stops, you can kind of just eat them too, at least on the keys that we were doing. Once you defeat all 3 of these packs, that will spawn Veximus. Now, Veximus is another boss that was pretty notorious early on in the early part of Dragonflight. And so, to the point that like you had to do some really, really ugly cheese strats in order to make that boss work. So let's take a look at what this boss does. He hasn't actually changed anything. So we'll go ahead and play the footage here. And as you can see, I'm taking him initially at least right in the center. Now there were some strategies where you'd pull him off to the side. And the reason for that is that this arcane expulsion actually will follow the tank. So if you're a tank, don't do that. And then he's going to have these orbs that will come in. And every orb that you get is a debuff that is onto you. Now there's a couple of ways to handle it. A DK with anti-magic shell, for example, can grab like a bunch of them and not get the debuff and take the extra dot damage. You can have your healer grab a bunch and then dispel themselves. Or you just have your tank grab a bunch of them and your healer just bombs heals into the tank. Or you can just spread it out and have everyone grab one. Lots of ways to handle those orbs. The big thing is you don't want to get the Veximus, otherwise there'll be really big damage that goes out. Now you saw these circles that went out that leave these puddles on the ground, so there is some space denial into the arcane rain, which is just your standard dodge 3 swirlies that come out in a staggered formation. So throughout the whole fight, he is also going to do a knockback, and so one of the things with positioning is that you always want to make sure that you're positioning to where you can grab the orbs without actually putting yourself into a position where you're going to get kind of screwed by it. Now one thing I do appreciate that our DK was doing here is he was trying his best to get these orbs away from the middle of the platform, because he generally saw that I was tanking him there, so that we could get there. Now he missed that one, unfortunately, but it is what it is. But that's Veximus. So you basically want to make sure that you're grabbing the orbs, making sure that you don't space deny yourself too harshly, and then as a healer person or someone that has good sustainer defensives, you want to make sure that you're soaking the orbs and making sure that you aren't causing a ton of problems for your group, because again, if they get to the boss themselves, it will splash out huge arcane rain damage that will kill you. All right, and then you move on to the final section, which is the head teacher's enclave. Now a couple things to note about this: the spectral invokers are going to be your main kick targets here because of the arcane bolt. A good way to do it. Now it doesn't do a ton of damage, but they kind of machine gun these, so if you don't kick and interrupt and spell lock them out, they aren't very good at moving. So you're going to either need a kick, a silence, or like a ring of peace in order to control these mobs if you're trying to pull them onto things like these Echo Knights. Now these Echo Knights, what they did in Dragonflight was they would whirlwind in place where they were standing. And then there was some weird like Z-axis stuff that you could do where you could tank them at like the top of the stairs and then move down 3 stairs, and you would actually be able to stand inside the radius of the blade storm without actually getting hit. Well, they've changed this ability now to this arcane smash, which is basically going to do kind of big damage, but then their whirlwind ability, what they do is they create a projection of themselves and throw it at a location. And then that location has everything whirlwinding inside of it. So in this case, it's changed a little bit to where you don't need to necessarily pull away from the Echo Knights. You just need to watch where the Echo Knight is projecting, doing their projections, and then moving away from that and not standing inside of it. So when you pull 2 or 3 Echo Knights at a time, it does get nasty. But those are the only 2 mobs, these invokers that are going to be your main kick targets, and then these Echo Knights that are here throughout the way. And finally, let's go look at Echo of Doragosa. This boss has been changed a little bit, and I would argue is still one of the most boring bosses in this dungeon period. But it can get really ugly if you don't handle it well, because there's a ton of space denial in this fight. So let's take a look at the footage here that I got. So as you can see, what I'm doing is I'm grabbing her. Once she puts out these 2 like puddle areas, I move her to the opposite side of them. And the reason for that is that she's going to occasionally spawn orbs out of those puddles that will maneuver around the room. The other thing is she's going to do this energy bomb ability onto a DPS, and as you can see, they're moving it off to the side here. You can see that in the top right corner, and it leaves behind a little splash. Now every time you get one of these, you're going to get a debuff. You can see this purple debuff up in my debuff section. I have 2 of them. Once you get 3 of them, you will actually lay a puddle down that's similar to the ones that are on the left side of the screen here now. Obviously it does the pull in and then everyone has to get out. So you go from there. And I apologize for the camera angles, tanks. You know this feeling. You really can't see anything. The Astral Breath does follow you, so no point in trying to avoid it and move, but it does put a stack of that debuff on you. And as you can see, I got my third one, and it left a debuff on the ground. Now, what I'm doing in this fight is I'm doing everything I can to try and keep her as close to the edge as I can, so that when I get the Arcane Blasts into the extra debuffs and go from there. Now, these orbs that are flying around, if you get hit by one of them, you gain a stack of the debuff. So there are strategies where you will purposely like spawn a puddle when and where you want them, so that you can kind of maximize where you keep your space clean at. But that's going to entirely depend on your group and the strategy that you want to do with it. For the most part, if you just avoid the orbs as much as humanly possible, you're going to be okay. Now, one thing is the tank, and I was a little slow in the positioning here, and it's what killed our DK, is that, as you can see, there's a bunch of puddles around her, and I didn't really move her fast enough so that the DK couldn't get up. And we're going to do the rest of this fight basically by having that one DPS down, because he was our battle res. But you've seen the entirety of this fight. It's avoid the orbs. If you get the circle around you here, just try to take it away from the group. And if it's your third one, you want to make sure you spawn it away from kind of the central part of the room and go from there. So what a lot of people will do is they will put them like as close to behind the boss and try to keep all of these puddles as stacked closely as possible. Now, I put this one way out over here because I was just trying to make sure that we have the space for the rest of my team to operate. So, but that is Algeth'ar Academy. Overall, this dungeon just did get a timer reduction on beta with notes as I record this. So it is going to be a little bit tighter on the timer, but overall, I think this key is definitely the one that is going to be the weekly key lovers one. It's a very simple, straightforward key. Other than Croft being changed and being a little annoying, all of these bosses are very straightforward. A lot of the trash, the most problematic trash, you can either avoid in the case of the Arcane Ravagers or fight very few of them. And they've reduced a lot of the casters that used to be in this dungeon, because you used to have like 11 kicks and 12 stops that you used to have. With the battle staffs and stuff like that being there in the past and now removed. From a tank perspective, this is a lot of physical damage, so tanks that deal well with physical damage are going to have a field day in this dungeon. You're going to feel pretty unkillable outside of maybe gathering up a few mobs. But I think this key right now, as it's tuned, is the easiest key, and it's not close on beta. I think this is by far the easiest dungeon. I could see at the highest key levels that this key will be done 2 key levels or more above the next closest dungeon. So Algeth'ar Academy is back. It's the same old Algeth'ar Academy that a lot of us loved and remembered, with small quality of life tweaks. And Croft, I think, was made a little bit worse as a boss because you can't do the strat that was the most fun, in my opinion. You're forced into having to actually do the mechanics, which, I mean, I get, but I still don't like. But overall, this dungeon is quite good, and you get a free 5% secondary stat boost, so you're always a little bit more powerful inside this dungeon versus, say, most of the other ones, because you always have a flat 5% of your best secondary stat that does persist through death. So let me know what you think about Algeth'ar Academy. Are you looking forward to it? Do you think this key is going to be the easiest key like I think it will be in Season 1 of Midnight? Let me know what you think below. Remember to like, share, subscribe, and to share this and all the other Season 1 Dungeon Guide videos that I'll be making. So until the next video, hope you all stay safe. Hope you enjoy yourself. You're having fun. You keep on gaming. We'll see you next time.